Good morning, St. Francis. Good morning, people of God. It is Monday, the 10th day of July, 2023, Monday of the 14th week of the year, the 14th week in Ordinary Time. Coming to you this morning from the Franciscan Memorial Garden. As you can see, the sod has really come in quite nicely. It's like we laid it down last year, and again, it's always questions of, how is it going to take and whatever it is, but it is quite lovely. It looks very beautiful, and the crepe myrtle is in bloom over here, and it is Camp St. Francis happening this week, and so there's a lot of things that are happening here in the preschool and then down by TFS. I was going to go over to the Perini fountain back behind me a little bit, but the rains and everything else like that have turned it green, so hopefully we're going to start cleaning that out a little bit today to bring it back to its nice blue color. So maybe later on in the week I can show everybody the Perini fountain. It's one of the nice little areas to kind of cool off, put your feet in the water, be able to sit and reflect here on the campus. The readings for today, continuing in Genesis, we leave the saga of the story of Abraham and Sarah. They have, again, Isaac has been born, Isaac has almost been sacrificed, but then not. Isaac has found a wife, and now Isaac has had a child, actually two, Jacob and Esau. And Saturday, if we would have had Mass, we don't have Mass on Saturday, the reflection would have been on basically how Jacob takes away what is Esau's birthright, and basically because God favors Jacob over Esau, and Jacob's able to become the one through whom, again, God says he will multiply multiply descendants. And there's somebody screaming, multiply descendants like the sands of the shore and the stars of the sky. These kinds of things like that. And so basically we move today to Jacob now traveling, because he kind of has to get away from Esau and everything else like that, and has to basically take care of himself and not get in the way of Esau's anger, because it's true that Jacob has done a terrible, awful thing. And so, but God again is working through terrible, awful things to kind of make happen what God wants to have happen. Which, why doesn't God do it in the first place correctly? It's again another great question to ask again and again. It's again, Genesis is filled with a bunch of holes that are not easily filled in, and so it is why Jacob is on this journey, that he lays down to sleep, and he has the great dream of his ladder, a stairway, whatever have you, that goes from earth into heaven, and he sees God's messengers going up and down the stairwell, this ladder, what have you, and God stands next to him, and in this dream basically says, reiterates the promise that he made to his grandfather Abraham about descendants being numerous and moving to the east and to the west, north and to the south, and that all people again will become blessed because of this. And then Jacob does what is right to do, is that he marks the place out as holy. He changes its name. He sets up like a little shrine and those kinds of things like that, but then continues on his journey. But again, it's always Jacob, this person who steals what he should not be stealing. And his mother, again, Sarah Rebecca is the one who makes this happen too. So both of them are not good people, and yet God is using them to be able to further God's plan. And again, the complexities of God within this, give us pause, that God does not act in ways that seem rational or reasonable at times for us, but God acts in ways that further God's plan. And God's plan is always, for the glory and wonder of what God has created, and that being us, as well as all his creation. In the gospel, we actually have two encounters that are separated kind of from each other. A synagogue official, or some official's daughter, has died, and he goes to Jesus and basically says, if you lay your hand on her, she will revive. And Jesus says, let's go. But on the way, again, a woman with a hemorrhage, basically, that has not stopped, for quite some time, says, if I just touch the tassel of his cloak, I will be healed of this hemorrhage. And so she does. And, Jesus is like, who touched me? And the woman in fear and trembling comes before him and says, I did. And basically Jesus says, it is your faith that has saved you, not some kind of magical work that I can do. And so honoring this woman for what she believes will happen, what she believes can happen, in her encounter with Christ, in her encounter with Jesus, and then the story continues of going to the man's house where his daughter has died, and everyone is crying and moaning and being sad because of this death, and Jesus basically says, "Why are you crying? She's just asleep," which is a very insensitive thing to say, you might think, but again, Jesus has come there to do what the man asked him to do. He lays his hand on the girl, she gets up, and he says, "Give her something to eat." Again, as we take a look at life life, as we take a look at the world around us, we see it only through one lens. We see it only through one way. And that may be true to some extent, but it also may be something that jeopardizes or limits us or prohibits us from seeing the work of God in our midst. And that is something that we always must be careful to observe and careful to recognize and careful to see, because it is the work of God in our midst that brings wholeness and completion to our lives, especially in times that are tragic and terrible and sad. Again, a God who acts in ways that sometimes we don't understand, a God who acts in ways that are not easily explainable, a God who acts in ways that are not rational or reasonable, but a God, again, who acts out of love, a God who acts to further the God's plan of love, a God who helps to bring all things together so that all may be able to experience and receive the joy and wonder of God's presence in their lives. A blessed day, St. Francis and people of God. May the Lord give you his peace.